Welcome to Lesson 6, Security Assessment and Testing, End of Lesson Exam Review. So in the security assessment and testing domain, we covered a wide variety of topics. We started with just defining the difference between testing and examination. Testing being active, examination being passive. We also looked at different types of tests, including overt and covert. We then started talking about how do you plan a security assessment. Everything from what should the scope and selection be, who the assessor should be and what level of knowledge they require, how frequently should we do them, what should be logistics, indemnification, liability, and rules of engagement. In our security examinations lesson, we focused specifically on a spectrum of passive examinations, starting with document review all the way through synthetic transactions. For the next 3 lessons, target identification, password cracking, and penetration testing, we discussed active testing. In target identification, this is where we were identifying devices on the network, so we were doing active discovery for both authorized and unauthorized devices. This is where we're also identifying ports, services, applications, and vulnerabilities. In password cracking, we looked at the techniques that are used to discover and identify passwords, in particular brute force and dictionary attacks. We looked at the use of salting as well as other mitigation techniques. In penetration testing, we looked through the entire process and workflow of penetration testing. We also looked at types and techniques of testing, including red team and blue team, zero knowledge, full knowledge, and partial knowledge. We identified 3 very, very common exploits, which were injection, buffer overflow, and kernel flaws. We then turned our attention to log analysis. We looked at the benefits of analyzing and mining logs for both operational and security information. We looked at indicators of compromise and predictors of compromise, but we also explored the challenges and complexity of conducting log analysis and what some solutions may be. We then turned our attention to information security continuous monitoring, which said in addition to these point-in-time tests and examinations, we want ways to be continually gathering good information, gathering metrics, analyzing that metrics, and reporting it up in support of our risk management framework. Up until that point, all of these type of examinations and tests can be done either by internal or external parties. When we looked at third-party audits and regulatory examinations, now we're also dealing with the concept of independence. Our auditors and our examiners must be independent of the internal organization, so there must be no conflict of interest. So we looked at different types of audits, we looked at different types of opinions, unqualified, qualified, and adverse. We looked at various scopes of audits. We looked at audit frameworks, such as COBIT and SSA 16. We looked at the regulatory requirements related to audits, and we looked at regulatory requirements related to examinations, what type of examinations organizations could expect, as well as who the examiners were. And then lastly, we talked all through all of these various lessons about the importance of communicating, reporting, and responding, and integrating the outcome of all of these into our risk management profile, always keeping in mind the organizational risk tolerance. That's what we looked at in the security assessment and testing domain. So let's go through 5 questions. Again, we're going to go through these because I want you to have the answers, but more importantly, I want to talk about your approach to answering these questions. Question 1. Interviews with members of the incident response team to determine readiness would be considered a audit, an examination, an incident response exercise, or a violation of confidentiality. So our key here is that we are doing interviews. Okay, so interviews are not evidence-based. Our audits are always evidence-based. Interviews are always also passive. So we're probably going to say it's not an audit because we're not looking for any evidence. It's not really an incident response exercise. There's no scenario. We're just doing interviews with them. I suppose depending on who it is, there could be a violation of confidentiality if they shared information, but that would be a stretch for an answer. Really what we're looking at here is examination. Interviews are passive. Interviews are a form of examination. Question 2. Which of the following statements is not true about synthetic transactions and monitoring? So our key here is not. we're going to be talking about synthetic transactions and monitoring. Now this may be a topic that you say, oh gosh, I can't remember what synthetic transactions and monitoring is. So let's look at our answers to see if maybe we can come up with any clues. Synthetic transaction testing uses recorded actions. Synthetic monitoring does not capture live data. Both of those are really telling us the same thing. We're using recorded actions. We're not capturing live data. So in neither case are we using anything live. Synthetic web transactions are used to test availability and transaction response times. And synthetic transactions must be updated daily. Now, it would really help if you do remember what synthetic transactions and monitoring are. But a clue you might be able to pull out of this, again, is that we're using recorded information, that we're not capturing live data. That might tell you, well, then it must not have to be updated daily because it's not live data. The correct answer here for what's not true is it's not true that synthetic transactions must be updated daily. Synthetic transactions do use recorded data, they do not capture live data, and they are used to test availability and transaction response times. In question 3, a blank attack uses a file containing words, phrases, and commonly used strings as input. Brute force, a birthday hash, a dictionary, and a buffer overflow. Where a brute force attack is an attack that just keeps trying over and over and over again and using unlimited time and resources will be successful. Now, perhaps a brute force attack uses words and phrases and commonly used strings, but that's not really the MO of a brute force. A birthday hash is what's trying to produce collisions, so we're going to get rid of that one. And a buffer overflow is when we put too much information into the buffer, into memory, so that malicious instructions are executed. Doesn't work there. So really what we were looking for here was dictionary. A dictionary attack uses a file that contains words, phrases, and commonly used strings. So hopefully when you saw these terms like words and phrases, you said, ah, yes, it's a dictionary attack. Question 4. In a test scenario, the blank attacks and the blank defends. The white hats attack? No. Let's try this. In a test scenario, the blank attacks and the blank defends. The black hats attack and the white hats defend. The red team attacks and the blue team defends. The bad guys attack and the good guys defend. The outsiders attack and the insiders attack. You can almost go with any of these. Right? Black hats, we usually think about the bad guys, and white hats are the good guys. But the real answer here is going to be red team and blue team. It's not outsiders and insiders. It's not necessarily bad guys and good guys or white hats and black hats. Right? This isn't a test scenario, so this isn't an actual attack. In an actual attack, maybe we've got the bad guys attacking us. We've got the outsiders attacking us. We've got the black hats. But this is a test. And in the test, the red team's going to attack and the blue team's going to defend. Question 5. A blank audit opinion is issued when there are minor deviations. A blank audit opinion is issued when control objectives are not met. And a blank opinion is issued when the auditor does not have any significant reservations. So let's look at our choices. Clean, adverse, and qualified. Type 1, Type 2, and Type 3. Satisfactory, poor, and excellent. Or qualified, adverse, and unqualified. So let's read through these. Hopefully you actually put them in ahead of time. You got them on your own, but let's read through. A clean audit opinion is issued when there's minor deviations. We said clean was actually qualified and it meant everything was fine. So that's not going to work because we're saying there are minor deviations. So we're going to get rid of that answer. Type 1, Type 2, Type 3, that's a red herring just to throw you off. Right? The only time you've seen Type 1, Type 2, not even a Type 3, is Type 1 and Type 2 were two different types of SAE 16 audits. Satisfactory, poor, and excellent, those are purely subjective terms. They don't belong in an audit. So our answers are a qualified audit opinion is issued when there are minor deviations. An adverse audit opinion is issued when control objectives are not made. and an unqualified opinion is issued when the auditor does not have any significant reservations. So what I want to point out to you here is sometimes you're just going to get these red herrings. Satisfactory, poor, excellent, type 1, type 2, type 3. Don't let them throw you. You should know what these are, and don't let your confidence be shaken by these red herrings or these totally fake answers that are coming into play. So I hope this review helped you, and I look forward to seeing you in the next domain.